We're here for the fifth of our webinar series, co-sponsored by the North American Millets Alliance and the Feast Lab at the University of Missouri and the Center for Regenerative Agriculture at University of Missouri. My name is Jonathan Landeck. I'm here with Sophia Satt from University of Missouri right now, Joni Kindwell-Moore, another co-founder along with Don Osborne of North America Millets Alliance, NAMA. Thank you very much for being here today. We have an outstanding presentation today by two people on the processing of millets from harvest to food. We'll be hearing from representatives of Simple Needs as well as Bay State Milling Company. First up, I believe we're going to have Garen Nightengale from Bay State Milling Company talking about millets from field to plate, and that will be followed by Tristan Leclerc from Simple Needs, who's the CEO of Simple Needs, a gluten-free bread company, speaking about millets, the underrated superfood. Then we'll have a Q&A afterwards for the last 20 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes. And I welcome you again. Thank you for being here. They've been great so far, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot today as well. So any other questions? If not, we turn it over to Garen to begin. Is that right?
Hello, everyone. Nice to see this group gathered like this today. Talk about millet, something that I've been involved with closely for the last 8 years. I started working with millet. Actually, before I started working here in Colorado at this location with millet, I had some exposure to millet in the past in Kansas. So I was somewhat familiar with it, but became much more intimately involved here as I moved to Colorado and started working with Rob Knowles here, who started this plant for the name of Clean Dirt Farm. And so, yes, something that I've grown to know at least a few things about. So we may just go ahead and start at the field, the farm level, where our plant is located here in Northeast Colorado is in the heart of millet country, and I honestly believe we grow some of the best millet within a 100-mile radius of our plant here. So I think we're ideally situated. Many of the farmers that we work with quite a number of farmers. I would say between 80 and 90 different farmers that we source from. Now, some of those farmers may bring only one load in over the course of a year, or maybe even 2 or 3 years. And then we do have a core group of farmers that bring many thousands of bushels in each year that we basically know that we are counting on getting their millet. We know they're very aware of how to raise high quality millet, what it takes to do that. On the field side, some of the challenges with millet as far as on the farm side are it's a short season crop. It's really not that difficult to raise through most of the year. It doesn't take a lot of moisture, which we all know is one of the things that we appreciate about millet. But when it comes closer to harvest time, it takes some intense management for these farmers to get it right. You can get some grain in your combine bin to get it, but to get your maximum yield as well as your high quality, it's an art that a lot of these farmers have really developed over the years. And one of those things being is exact. So typically millet is swapped down into windrows before it is picked up by the combine, before it's actually harvested. So there's a judgment call there of exactly when to cut that plant off away from its moisture so it can dry down properly. The big reason for them doing that is if they let it ripen fully out in the field, it typically ripens at somewhat different stages, and you'll have millet that is ripe in the head while some is not ripe yet, not ready for harvest, and the Colorado wind will come along and shatter that ripened millet out of the head, so you'll lose a bunch to the ground. So the way they avoid that is putting that down into windrows and letting it ripen in a more consistent and less prone to shatter method. So that's what we have grown to basically expect from our growers around here that we deal with on an annual basis. So then typically these farmers then they do have on-farm storage. We do not actually have a lot of storage at our plant here. So we're bringing their millet in through the year. So we just schedule those loads coming in throughout the year. And then we're ready, once we bring it in, we do have some short-term storage. And then as we have orders to produce against, that's typically we don't have a lot of finished product storage as well either. So we're producing to order. And so as we bring it in, then we just have a process that we go through. And I'll bring that up here on the screen. So we can see this is a quick rundown of our process that we're looking at in our plant. So we bring it in and we do these tests on every load coming in. We test for to make sure that it meets our specs. Density, that or some people call it test weight of the product, can have a huge impact on our yield. You just have more weight per volume. And moisture is a huge factor in our hulling process that we look after. And of course, purity. We want to make sure that the millet is in good condition. No off odors, that it's something that looks like it came fresh from Mother Earth and is ready to go into our process. So that's our receiving process. Then we move directly into our cleaning process. And that begins with a simple screener, air screener, if you will, that we see pictured right here, a diagram here. And that is a cleaner that you'll find in just about every seed plant or grain processing plant of any kind, where it removes material through a series of screens as well as aspiration, basically working on the factors of size and density as well. So that does the bulk of the cleaning right there. That gets it up to probably 99% pure. But when we're looking at a food product, we're looking at getting that next 0.97, 0.99. That's what we're looking to get a pure product. So then that's what basically the rest of this process is about, is making it into a food product. Here after the screener, we have what you could probably call bird seed or a cleaned millet. From that machine, we go to another machine that's called a cylinder separator, or some people call it an indent drum. And it separates by size as well, or by length. So it has indentations in the cylinders that are able to capture the millet that the millet falls into and is carried up onto the good side, whereas anything that does not fall into that indent is discarded into trash or into our feed stream. From our cylinder separator, you'll see it goes into over our gravity table, which works strictly by density. So we're out of the sizing and we're into the density, the weight differences of the material that we're running across there. So this machine is very effective at separating the heavy, good millet from the light chaff, weed seeds, anything that may have got through the sizing operation that is basically lighter than we want in our product. So from there, from the gravity table, we go to a series of destoners that actually work on the same principle as a gravity table. They're removed by density, but rather than whereas on the gravity table, we're taking the very heavy side, the heaviest cut to keep in our product stream. The destoner, we're removing that heavy cut because obviously stones are heavier than our millet. And so these machines are very effective at removing like-sized stones from the product. So then after that, at that point is where we have what we would call a cleaned millet, a clean food grade millet. Which there are some applications in the food processing business where they will just use cleaned millet. For example, we have customers that are using for sprouting, for your gluten-free beers and such. They're typically using just a cleaned millet because they, once we get into the hulling, you get hard on your endosperm, and with your sprouting process, obviously you want that in place to go through that process. So we do sell a small amount from our plant of clean millet, but typically our millet is going through the next process, which is the hulling. And the hulling basically starts with a huller. We have a series of hullers, friction hullers that basically scrub the hull off the grain. And kind of in the same, right along with that hulling operation, we have an aspiration system, an aspirator that sucks those holes off as they're scrubbed off the grain and remove those into the feed stream. So after that operation through the huller and aspirator, as we run that millet through that huller, like I said, it's a friction process, so it's pressing together. So we have some breakage that comes out of that. So we run that over a sifter that removes the fines, removes that breakage out of the product. And then from that sifter, we actually go up to our color sorter. So we go through all these cleaning processes and to give us a pure millet. But when you have something, and like we talked about, we have size and density. Those are your typical ways. Those are your conventional methods of separating a cleaning grain, basically any kind of grain. Those are your conventional ways of cleaning. Well, when you have something that's the same size and weight as millet, which probably the biggest one for us over the years has been a wild buckwheat, very, very similarly sized to millet, as well as weight-wise, very, very similar to millet. But of course, it's a totally different color. So a color sorter or electric eye is very, very efficient at removing those type of foreign grains out of the product. So then after the color sorter, we go to yet another gravity table that again is separating by density. So there may be still some holes left some loose holes left in the product, or maybe even some smaller pieces that don't quite meet grade. And that gravity table there will separate those out into the feed stream. And then at that point, we have bona fide whole millet, food grade millet, if you will, that is, ready to go into food production. Now, that is basically where we end up here at our Sterling location. From here, then, we do a good percentage of our, not a majority percentage, but a good percentage of our product goes to one of our other locations in our division in either Bolingbrook, Illinois, or Woodland, California, for blending or milling or this simply safe treatment, where it goes through a 5-log reduction process to get rid of any pathogens that may be there. And that is our process in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions right now?
All right, we could take some questions now for sure. There's a question from, all right, there's a couple of questions. One, Garen from Matt Goldstein, he asks, where is the Simply Safe millet processed? Is that California or Illinois?
So we have capability at both places, both plants.
Okay, and Sergio Nunez, the Arco has a question. Why did you not place the last gravity table, why did you not place the last gravity table after the aspirator before the sifter in order to keep the last bits of hull from going into the optical?
You know what? That's a question that I'm not sure that I can answer. I might have to get my plant supervisor who's been here 15 plus years to say, hey, this is why, because I really can't give you a definitive answer on that.
Okay. Okay, well, we can, we still have some time for some interim questions before we get to Tristan, if he's here. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, Babak Nakota has a question. What types of millet can you process, Garen?
So what we do here is strictly proso millet. That is the only type of millet that we've ever, well, unless you include sorghum. We have processed sorghum through this plant as well in the past. But as far as maybe other like the German, golden German or those types of millet, we have not done that at this plant. We're just really not set up for that.
Okay. Another question. This one from, it's not, I don't think it's from Sophia Sapp, but it could be. There's a couple people named Sophia Sapp today. But the question is approximately what percent of millet is hulled from the original weight?
So we are typically we figure about, you're probably going to get about 5 to 10% removed loss in just your cleaning process, probably closer to 10% loss in your cleaning process, and then your hulling process would bring another 10 to 15% loss. So you'd be looking at about 75 to 80% yield overall from pounds across the scale. And that's if you have a good experienced operator. And that is a factor. That's where a huge factor is in the quality of the millet coming in, and that's why we value our growers, many of our core growers, so highly, because they know how to bring us give us a head start with the quality they bring in.
Okay, thank you. We have a follow-up from Babak who had asked about the types of millet that can be processed. He's wondering, is it okay for pearl millet as well?
You know, to my knowledge, we've never tried pearl millet at this plant. Not since I've been here.
Okay, and Babak also asked, is it a smart system to keep the aileron layer? Are you there, Garen?
Yeah, go ahead. So
okay. The question is it a smart system? I think he means, is it smart for a system to keep the aileron layer? Am I understanding your question correctly, Babak?
I'm not understanding what the question is. So.
Aileron layer. Did you mention aileron layer?
I guess I don't know what he's referring to.
Yeah, I don't really know what he's referring to either. But we can come back to that.
I could jump in. I got to jump in for a second. Jonathan, I'll just mention that pearl millet, there's a question about pearl millet. Food grade pearl millet is not grown commercially in the U.S. at this point, or in Canada or in Mexico.
Right. I had a question, Garen, about this issue of inconsistent ripening and shattering. In your opinion, is that just a breeding issue that you could breed that out of you could breed more consistency into?
I don't know. I would say that could have an impact. I suppose there could be some improvements made on that. But I think probably more than that, just the kind of the way that's been approached on more of a technology level, if you will. There are some companies that have come out with a product they call, it's actually kind of a latex spray that is applied to the plant before to just kind of hold that together. I don't know that there's been a focus on that factor in the breeding at all. If that's something that they would see potential in, or I really can't answer that for sure.
I see. Okay, good. Okay, Babak clarifying his question. Not to remove the whole seed layers, which are nutritional, with the husk during the hulling. I'm not certain. We don't have to always ask all these questions by the chat either. If you want to, if you want to ask it verbally, you can just raise your hand. But keep going here.
So that may
Yeah,
have,
go
that
ahead.
question may have come from when I talked about us hulling like our malters or those people that want to sprout, rather having a cleaned product rather than a whole product, if I understand the question right. So we're not deliberately removing the germ from the grain, but it's just that through the process, we're likely to damage the germ. And so I don't know if that answers his question or not, I'm not sure.
Joni said something about you've discussed this with Dryland Genetics before, Joni?
Yeah, just when I was talking to them about kind of desirable traits that might not be on their radar in breeding, because they're really focused on drought tolerance and yield, but yield is only as good as yield you get on the other end of the dehulling process, as far as I'm concerned. So when they're looking at like, you know, the test weight and like yield at the farm gate, we need to make sure that we're also selecting for traits that makes dehulling efficient. But I don't know if they ever took that into consideration, you know, like it was literally over coffee. So I don't know how far that went as far as like into their program. I don't know.
Right. You know, that great kudos to them if they did, but so much of the millet in this, you know, that they're looking at is just going to bird seed. They're probably thinking, wow, that's rather tertiary. But
Okay. We have a comment from Gary Wheatcraft, a grower. Also, he's been on, I think, every webinar so far. A comment that pre-harvest rains cause more proso heads to emerge, causing immature seeds. In other words, greener, lightweight seed at harvest.
right. Yes, second.
It's a lot of good questions. Do you have any questions you simply want to ask, not via the chat, anyone?
Yeah, we had one about the percentage loss at hulling, or sorry, at for hulling. Is there a particular percentage lost in the hulling process of grain lost, and what becomes of that? So, for instance, if the grain is damaged and you basically have fragments of these small proso grains, are those simply lost to the system, or do you gather them? What percentage is there?
So those go into our feed stream, where we're actually currently blending our hulls that we remove with our screenings, the cleanings, if you will. We're actually blending those together for livestock feed.
Okay, any other questions? We have a lot of new people here today. That's really terrific to see. People who I don't think have been on previous webinars. Is Tristan on?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Are you all set to? Oh, you're labeled Nicholas. Okay, you've been here the whole time. Are you all set to make your presentation?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's go into that. Thanks so much, Tristan.
You betcha. Sorry for my voice. I had a chest cold earlier in the week and I've come up quite hoarse. So
It's okay. No problem.
let me go ahead and share my screen, and I will then I'll run through this. 1 second. All right. Oh, I have to be given permission to share my screen.
Yeah, I just gave you co-host permission. I didn't recognize your name on the tag, so you should have co-host permission now.
It's still telling me I don't have it.
There's
There's two Nicholas Aarons. Yeah.
Oh, there are.
Yeah, there's one. There's a faceless, and then there's a face. Oh, there. Okay.
I have the face.
Okay.
Okay, does it work now?
There, I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Hang on 1 second. Just get it into display mode here. Oh, of course. Let's put it on the other screen. Now, 1 second.
Thank you, by the way, Garen, for that presentation. It was really great.
You are welcome.
Oh, give me a break. All right, I'm going to share my screen and then we'll sort it out. So, all right, you guys can see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So just a quick introduction of who we are, for who I am. But I'm the chief executive officer and founder of a consumer packaged goods brand of gluten-free bread called Simple Needs. And our focus is really centered around truly nutritious and delicious gluten-free bread. Who I am, basically, when my son Shiloh developed allergy to gluten, I soon discovered where there were no nutritious gluten-free options on the market. Everything was made from starches and gums and eggs and like kind of putting together this kind of paste that was stuck together with eggs and gums. And I really didn't want to feed my son that. I wanted him to be able to have, the purpose of bread is to get whole grains into your diet. I mean, it should be anyways, in my opinion. And so I drew on my background. I studied chemistry and also grew up in a family of natural food innovators, fourth generation vegetarian. And I had worked for a naturopath's practice, helping his patients who were allergic to various foods know how to build meal plans for them. And so I kind of drew on that experience and scientific method, and it took me about 3 or 4, 5, 6 months to come up with the first edible solution that was not just gluten-free, but also top 9 allergen-free, and sourdough, which I really I believe that fermentation is something that our modern society has lost sight of its importance in a diet. And so I really wanted to make a sourdough bread, not risen with baker's yeast. And then also making an ancient grain bread was important. So, and ultimately where we're at right now is we're scaling into national deals with Sprouts currently. We're in Whole Foods. We're a global vendor with them on the East Coast. We're in all their stores on the East Coast. We sell online through our online e-commerce on our website, simpleneeds.com. And our business is just absolutely exploding. But really, truly, we have a really great team, and it's still a very hands-on process. And it's important to me that we didn't compromise on some of the health principles in the manufacturing process. And so pitfalls that introduces is that I'm using whole grains like millet instead of that are as we've kind of just seen, there's so much inconsistencies in the supply chain that it introduces a lot of risk in the manufacturing process, as opposed to working with processed starches and such things and gums that are highly processed and have a really strict quality protocol around them. So ultimately, what I want to talk about today is how millets specifically fill a vital need in the market. And so ultimately, 3 points I want to talk about are how millets and other whole grains answer the gluten-free conundrum. And I'll get a little deeper on each of these as we go, and then also millets as a functional element in foods, not just bird seed, but really kind of like the flour of millet and its properties from a chemical basis and how it interacts with bread and crackers and whatever else you might be making. They have really amazing properties. And then the challenges of an under-researched supply chain and underdeveloped supply chain. So we'll get into that too. But first, these are kind of our lineup. We have four flavors. Sourdough is our base recipe. Quinoa power grains relies a lot more on quinoa, which is another ancient grain outside of the millets family. And then pumpkin nickel is our play on pumpernickel with pumpkin seeds in it. And then our new flavor is cinnamon raisin. Then we have a few others in the frozen line. Those are all sold fresh. So just looking at the gluten-free industry, try to answer that first question of how millets can solve the gluten-free conundrum. The gluten-free marketplace is growing at a 12% CAGR right here through 2024, but this was actually from 2017, and it has kept up with that, and I think that's actually increased from what it forecast. And in 2017, it was a $3.5 billion industry. What's interesting about that is gluten-free bread space is not keeping up with the gluten-free product industry, and that's mainly because most gluten-free products you find on the shelf are made from nutritious materials, like pastas made from chickpeas or made from red lentils or so forth, and they are really high in protein and are not just empty carbohydrates. Granolas and crackers and even power bars and different things. They're often built out of really nutritious foods, but those things are not very difficult to manufacture like bread is. And so I really bit off a very difficult nut to chew in making this product, but it was really a vital need, and millets gave me the ability to really tap into what the market was looking for, which is, only 28% of the market, the growth in this market is driven by celiacs, who honestly, many of them don't even care about health necessarily. They just medically cannot eat gluten, but they're not necessarily on a health journey, if you would. But what's the greater driver in the gluten-free space is actually non-celiacs with sensitivity or intolerance that has not been identified as the source, and diabetics and health-conscious consumers who just are trying to get away from wheat breads because they feel like they're unhealthy for them, mainly because they're very highly processed and a lot of white flour is used, and wheat itself is highly hybridized. And so there aren't a lot of brands that are really prioritizing even healthy wheat breads. So they kind of either take an exodus from bread altogether or are looking to gluten-free products to try to fill that need for themselves and their health journeys. And so what millets provide are an answer to that need. And how they do that is these points here. Millets in general show high antioxidant activity, and millets include. We have 3 grains in our formulas that are considered millets. So that is millet itself, which is proso, and then there's sorghum, and then there's teff. Teff is really my favorite of the millets, honestly, both for its properties and also its nutritional content. But they've been shown in studies to control blood sugar and cholesterol. So it's amazing is that carbohydrates from ancient grains have the opposite effect of what you would think a carbohydrate would have. They actually reduce blood sugar in the body rather than spike it. And so people are coming to understand that and are looking for whole grains. And it's just not offered in most gluten-free breads. They also decrease triglycerides and C-reactive protein, which are really important for heart health. And they provide a good source of protein, of fiber, magnesium, copper, and phosphorus, as well as an excellent source of manganese, which helps regulate inflammation and promotes bone and brain health. So it's a trace mineral. And so also interestingly enough, millets are the only lectin-free grains. And so lectins are a protein that is really hard on the gut. It's kind of the nature's self-defense mechanism. And all grains, including also a lot of vegetables and greens, have lectins in them. It's nature's basically defense against natural animals and such eating too much of one thing, and it'll actually cause irritation in the gut and cause digestion problems. But millets are amazingly lectin free. So that's actually a big keyword for our customers also, because they're also looking for lectin free solutions for bread, but that are also nutritious. So how we stack up in the marketplace, we're the only ones that are organic. In fact, I've got a product right here. This is our newest packaging and formulation, where we've written organic right on top. They have all their certifications on here: organic, non-GMO, gluten-free. We're vegan friendly, as well as top 9 allergen free. So it's really a beautiful package and a beautiful product. It's kind of an artisan round shape, and true sourdough as well. So we're one of the few doing true sourdough. We're one of the few that are vegan. A good source of fiber. Most of them have a terrible carbs to fiber ratio, whereas ours is like 4 to 1. And then we're top 8, top 9 allergen free. No gums, no added sugar, no starches. Now this is a really big point. There's nobody else doing no starches, and that's really what the consumer is looking for. They don't want a bunch of empty carbohydrates that are basically getting from starch. And also, people are showing sensitivity to rice, so we don't use that either. So really, millets are the only reason we can have these checkpoints here. Really a vital necessity for us. And you can just these are my kids, by the way, 3 of the 4 of them. So you can kind of see the inside of our bread. It's beautiful crumb structure. It's such a beautiful loaf, a slice of bread. And it's nice and big, as you can see. These slices are, a good size slice. That you can make a sandwich on, like this. This is our burger sandwiches, actually. Versus our competitors, where a lot of these things are really seriously like this big, little tiny postage stamp deals. Or they're like, what is that? Wonder Bread looking, not really nutritious. And this, you can see, like, you see the crust on this bread. It's like this gradual gradient, because all they're doing is burning starch. It's just starch held up with eggs. So it's not really a true crust. It doesn't taste or perform like bread does. Whereas we have an actual crust and crusty kind of old world. And we're able to do that again because of millets in the product. And so, our customers, these are just feedback from our customers online and pictures they've taken of their productions. None of this are from us, except for this one picture in the middle. But honestly, we get so many of these with tens of thousands of 5-star reviews, and we get these reviews from customers. Thank you for making the best gluten-free bread I've ever had. I ordered 4 loaves from your site. I couldn't be happier. Seriously, the best. I had our first bread sandwich in 4 years, because our bread, actually, you can make a sandwich from it. I don't know how I've gone so long without knowing about your bread. It's insanely. It's become a staple in my instantly become a staple in my house. A lot of people are like, we haven't had bread in years. So it's like people are not finding that healthy bread product that they're looking for. And so we're sold fresh in grocery stores. We don't have the starches, gums, or eggs. We're true sourdough. We're vegan friendly. We're whole grain, high fiber, and it tastes absolutely amazing, like an old world bread. Again, perfectly positioned to capitalize on these market trends, which are 100% whole grains, gluten-free, good source of fiber, organic ingredients. We're now actually certified organic and plant-based and vegan friendly. So looking at the supply chain challenges, really kind of sprout damage, as we found, we've actually had millet itself come in that was completely off the charts in a totally different paradigm functionally than what we were used to, having completely opposite properties of what millet typically has. And we've kind of drilled into on it and discovered that it was likely due to sprout damage in the field. Now, what we were talking about is, how the ripe grains fall off, and they're innovating in the supply chain currently, but the further we can kind of take this to control that supply, the more you're going to find it's a viable, functional ingredient for gluten-free manufacturers like myself. And so, Bay State has been awesome with us, and we've developed, proprietary, like, in-house testing protocols and such for millets and other items that we use to identify these issues before they come to us. But it's really the difficulty is, I've been to their lab in Quincy, and they have this huge department dedicated to wheat And I mean, burning the starches down to, the ash, and like determining every little fine-tuned nitty-gritty you could possibly imagine. And yet, and there's very little research done for gluten-free grains. And so, we're drawing on some of their tools in that lab, but ultimately, and I think obviously the supply and demand is going to come in here, where if they see a lot of demand, that they'll increase their capacity to test and understand these grains and control the variance that we find from crop to crop. But that's really the difficulty, and it'd be awesome if we could get colleges and universities to sponsor more research, and get their students involved in researching these millets and these other gluten-free grains, and understanding what could be causing the variations, and taking it right down to the farm level and understanding the supply chain better. And it would just make life so much better for a manufacturer. So that's basically us in a nutshell. And I'll just tell you briefly, without getting into too much of my proprietary sauce, because there is a lot of proprietary research that it's gone into being able to do what we do. But millets specifically, they have interesting properties, like absorption, water absorption pre versus post bake, completely different than any other grains, where they hardly absorb. In millet, for example, hardly absorbs any moisture before baking, and then it absorbs like 4 times its weight in water, and it turns into a very dry substance after baking. And that's it's that property is what was backwards when it was sprout damage, where it would absorb more water up front, but then it wouldn't absorb any water in the bake, and it would turn into this gooey, goopy substance versus a very dry substance. So, just an example, complete opposite paradigms. And also just looking at teff and some of these other ones from ancient cultures, like Ethiopia, where they use teff to make injera and other flatbreads, and chapati in India, and anyway, so that's made from millet and sorghum, and so these ancient grains, millet, as teff, for example, which is a millet, it's the smallest, I believe. Either that or fonio is also a millet. Both African grains. It has a really high protein content, and the protein, the source, the type of protein that's found in is an albumin, a vegetable albumin, which is similar to the proteins of eggs, and it has similar properties to eggs in the functional element, in that it helps bind it helps bind the dough together and create a really good stretch for the bread, as well as giving really nice flavor profile and so forth. So anyway, it's also very high in iron. Teff specifically is, and so yeah, that's basically it from a functional perspective, from a nutritional perspective, from a supply chain perspective, from a end user's perspective.
Wow, thanks so much, Tristan. Obviously you eat, drink, and sleep millets. You have been thinking about this probably 24/7 for a long time, because you seem to be really into it. Your product looks beautiful. We have Don and I had the same question by coincidence. This sprout damage. It was kind of what does that mean exactly?
Well, I believe that, and the actual Nicholas Ahern's could probably speak more to this. Will the real Nicholas Ahern's please stand up? No, Aaron's. Anyway,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because I can jump in. It's been a pleasure working with Tristan, because I think as we go through all this millet progress, we're learning a lot side by side. So I want to at least give a big shout out and thank you for him to being transparent as we get to learn what's important and what's the main properties. I think what we were kind of looking at on potentially the sprout damage is we had some discussion. Tristan first said it just didn't have the water holding capacity, or when he tried baking it up, it just was a liquid bread. It had no kind of starch pasting. So when we looked at the rheological properties, when we ran kind of an RVA on it, it just had no starch pasting. So the assumption that we kind of came up to was something had impacted the starch profile, typically either higher loads of enzymes that degraded the starch, so that way it wouldn't set. And that's a lot of challenges with different millet varieties, is different set points, different viscosity. So just trying to get the consistency so we can give a consistent product to Tristan.
Basically, if the millet is ripened and then it's left in the field before it's harvested and it rains or it gets wet, you can start getting enzymatic activity inside the grain and it's starting to sprout. That enzymatic activity in the sprouting process is eating the carbohydrates for fuel. And so it's breaking down the starch, which is what helps set the grain in the baking process.
Interesting.
That's interesting
Wow.
because you've got the whole thing with sprouted grains now becoming a trend. But that's working in the opposite direction. Anyway, I don't know where to place that. I'm just trying to sort this out. But just thought I'd mention.
So sprouted grains are well, and so mind you, like sprouting doesn't have the same impact on all grains as far as a functional basis. We've worked with sprouted quinoa in the past, and it actually, well, here's the thing. Here's the specific thing. It's a problem for millet because of what millet needs to do for our product, which is dry it out. So quinoa in our formulation, for example, isn't there. And I've formulated using these 5 grains. We use millet, sorghum, buckwheat, teff, and quinoa. And each one is filling a different role. I'm trying to replace wheat. And so each of those grains actually provides a different functional element to the grain. And quinoa, for example, is that softening and very stretchy substance to begin with. If you sprout it, it just kind of augments that ability because I'm not interested in its starch so much as its proteins. And so it has that kind of stretchy, gooey, elastic nature. And so it's okay to do that. But for the millet sprouting, it was deleterious to us. So, the sprouting grains is kind of, and wheat, for example, I've worked with sprouted wheat in the past as well. And you're looking for the starch, but there's the gluten in wheat, which isn't damaged, I don't think, by sprouting because it's the proteins. And so, it probably has a different outcome, but it's not like night and day paradigm shift as millet is with the sprouting.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt Goldstein has a question, and if you're comfortable with answering it, what led you to use sorghum?
Again, it comes back down to, well, there's several reasons. There's a marketing reason, which is that sorghum is one of the highest of the millets in antioxidant. It's a super high antioxidant level. And so that's one reason. It's just because I know from a health perspective, it's really good for you. But second, it has different properties to millet, the proso millet. And so I really looked out every grain I could find that was gluten-free, that was commercially available in the US. And I studied every single grain. I built a spreadsheet and gave, numeric properties of the various things that I needed to accomplish to get good bread. And sorghum checks the box on some of those properties that the other millets don't and other ancient grains don't. So ultimately it has a functional reason, and it has a marketing or health reason as well.
Okay, great. We have 3 questions lined up here. Back to the sprout damage. Carlos Nunez de Arco wants to know if the sprout damage is visible and how you detect it.
From my angle, it's not visible because I get flour from Bay State. I'd have to ask Nicholas if they could see on their end before milling. But for me, it's detected instantly. And I've come to an internal, and I think Nicholas, you guys are doing this now also on your end, where I run a viscosity test. Mine's subjective. I don't have an RVA, but it's so obvious that I'll run it through a bake protocol where I'll take and hydrate the grain. I have a control that I know is good, and I actually kind of know exactly what I'm looking for. So I'll hydrate that flour into a ball of dough and bake it. And the outcome, it's literally binary. It's like yes or no. It's either like turns into almost like a mochi, or it's a dry, crumbly mess. And that's what I'm looking for, is a dry, crumbly, mess. So it's very obvious once I get the grain. But over to you, Nicholas, as far as whether you could tell before milling.
Yeah, I mean, I think Garen can jump in as well a little bit, but basically, as far as the millet going through the dehulling and creaming process, there wasn't really anything noticeable to the millers at the Sterling facility, nor was there anything alarming that would set off our millers when we're at Woodland or Bolingbrook that are milling it to a flour. Everything kind of ran normally, but like I said, once you add water, incorporate heat, and you start to look at the starch, its pacing profile, and what its overall water holding capacity and viscosity it had, it really had almost no viscosity. So it's really not until you start to do the bake test, which we always say is the true test is the bake test, did you really start to notice something different. And I think that's where there could also be more research and availability for developing new methods for us to identify issues. A lot of times when we're in our lab, we're looking at methods that are internationally recognized and verified that's kind of based on wheat baking. And then it's how do you apply those methods to non-traditional grains. In most applications, they don't work, so you got to modify them for your end needs.
Wow, there really is fertile ground for land-grant universities to be involved in, from planting to processing to distributing, really.
Absolutely.
We have from our terrific IT expert, Sophia Sepp, has a question about how far-reaching is your bread? Is it sold in all U.S. states?
Great question. The answer is not all the states yet, but very soon we will be. We're rolling out nationally in all Sprouts. So there's 380 stores. We'll be launching in on June 18. We'll be in all Sprouts from coast to coast. They're mostly centered on the southern states, though. So the northern states would not be covered, though we are in all the East Coast states from Georgia up to Maine. So definitely there, and we'll soon have kind of the South and the Sprouts, and Whole Foods will probably be rolling us out nationally in 2024. So you find us there, and then we're looking to Kroger has given us the okay to roll out in the fall into Fred Meyer's, so that will cover the Northwest region of the U.S. and we're looking at more saturation in the New England area, working potentially with Market Basket and food Stop and Shop, and a few of those northeastern grocery brands. But we're just kind of in the infancy of our growth. We've been really building out our sales through Whole Foods and also on our online sales. So you can buy our product anywhere in the States, even Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, on our website, and we'll ship it directly to your door. We actually bake it to order and ship it the same day we bake it. So it gets you very fresh.
Nice. We see here Yadi Wang has her hand or his hand up, and but before that, Babak Nokata has a question. Are all your breads single grain breads, and have you tried composite bread too?
No, none of them are using single grains. They're all actually using all 5 of those grains, which is necessary because, like I said, I'm blending the properties of each to get a specific bread-like consistency in our dough. So it's very difficult to eliminate one of them because you eliminate its properties that's contributing to the dough.
Interesting. Okay, Yadi, would you just like to ask your question verbally?
Oh, thank you. I think I probably have a comment. It's a little long to type in, but I'm a heritage wheat farmer, and really much appreciate your presentation and then learning about let's see kind of different properties. And I think there's something that I would like to share is one thing that we observe that is from the practices that will dictate on the nutrient density as well as those mineral levels, particularly, and also alter the protein quality and protein content in some specific examples. It's, as a farmer, I think to me, I always want to say that we're the practice dictate on a lot of things that we put out in the market from the first part of the supply chain. And for us, like one thing I observed is the heritage grain under regenerative practices and focusing on soil health, that our owner, who is diabetes type 2, and then his blood sugar after consuming our product made with our wheat flour, that can maintain within the normal level of that glucose, whereas other type of wheat, it couldn't. So, and I dive deeper into where, you know, the lysine or histidines or all those type of amino acid that can provide it in the soil and then become a peptide and then shoot up into the plants and then causing that protein quality change will have extremely impact on the either the wheat or, you know, the millet or sorghum, in my view, because I am growing millet, sorghum, tough, and Sudan, all those as my cover crop, and my sheep love them, and I love to, you know, harvest some in the future for human consumption. By this time, so to me is the manganese level, that is a tough one to really claim, in my view, because the oxidation reduction stage of the soil will, and also the fungal activity will change the manganese level, and then how that plant can uptake is just the metabolic processes. And I never would want to claim that, because 3 years in a row, my manganese level is completely different for the same type of wheat product. And for consumer education perspective, I was always want to be very careful, but all in all, really much appreciate the work you do, because as a Chinese, we've eaten millet for 8,000 years. And we, before 6,000 years ago, you know, we imported wheat from Fertile Crust, and that's where a lot of product in China are made of wheat. But millet, fox millet particularly, is something that we're still consuming, and potassium level is loaded, that we can always claim that, because that's a macronutrient, that's the plant metabolic process will preferentially uptake, and vitamin B, and those are the something that many other plants don't have, and is something unique about millet that my grandparents taught me. Again, I think millet should be very much appreciated, and you know, I wish to see more companies like you guys and doing this type of work. Big shout out to you guys. Thank you very much.
Wow, shout out to you, Yadi. What a contribution. That's really glad you're here today, and terrific comments and observations. We have a couple minutes. Anybody have any final questions? This was really fascinating. I learned a lot today. Thank you, Garen, so much for being here, taking your time out of your busy day, and Tristan for your dedication. Don?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to throw in one non sequitur at the end here. They were talking about taking the hulls off of the proso, and I'm remembering having come across a site, actually it was originally a site in the French website, but apparently proso hulls are being used as pillow fill. Is that does Bay State sell any proso hulls to anybody for that kind of use?
We don't. We just don't, and not because we haven't recognized that potential to some degree. But it just goes into our feed stream currently. It's more of a logistical challenge for us than anything. You know, with proper volumes and interest, it could become a thing for us. But right now, it's just not something that we have facilitated, and actually separating those out to a packaging line.
Thanks much. That takes us off the mainstream there, but I thought it was just sort of an interesting question. Millets do end up having a lot of uses, and we're mostly focused on food here, and then also on forage. But yeah, go ahead. Back to you, Jonathan. Thank you.
This is Gary Whitgriff. I'll address two things. One, millet hulling for pillows, it has to be cleaned, meaning you got to get the dust and stuff out of it. It works quite well. You need a fairly compact pillow, and it'll last for years. I have millet hull pillows, and they do provide a different characteristic of fitting around your neck and things like that. But my question is for the two users, how does millet test weight or proso test weight affect your process? Or do you look for millets that, especially basically, look for millets that are like 56 pound per bushel or heavier? What's your characteristic test weight?
So our spec, actually, our minimum spec is actually 53, but yes, we do like to see those that 55, 56 pound. And largely for yield reasons, and a lot of times then yes, your lighter weight millet would be smaller kernel size, and you just end up with kind of more of a fluff, if you will. But yeah, basically it would be and to speak beyond that, as far as how that would look, how a lighter test weight millet would perform in the baking. I'd be interested to know more about that.
Well, I used to do some hulling of proso. And the clean out is obviously higher the lower the test weight. And so, that should figure into the marketing.
Correct.
Tends not to, meaning that the standard 56 pound was converted to 50 pounds just to make the transactions easier when you're using buying it by the pound if you're an elevator. But I think there needs to be a discount scale, 56 and under, for the lighter test weights.
Well, sorry to say, our hour has come to an end. A couple of people have said thank you very much, and I had to leave early, but this was really terrific to everyone who asked questions. The presentations by Garen and Tristan, just really fascinating, and everybody's obvious interest in this subject. We'll be back again a month from now. I think it's the 21st of June. And we'll send little links and notes about this meeting. And we'll just keep this going. It's really great. Thank you once more. Really great, terrific to have you with us.